I think this is the most important topic I've ever talked about. And at the end, you tell me whether you agree with me or not. But let's start with some traumatic memories. We talk about the 737 MAX, Texas 77 MAX, and COVID-19. So just about 3.5 years ago, we have winter storm. I don't know how to pronounce it. I call it Uri because it's an Israeli name. Some people will pronounce it Yuri. It was just a block of Arctic air sweeping from the north all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. We have to compare it to the most recent natural disasters, but at the time it was considered the costliest in terms of property damage and the deadliest winter storm with over 700 fatalities. You may remember here what it was like in Houston for a week without power and without water. A couple of years before that, Boeing had 2 crashes, 737 MAX. It turns out that both were caused by something called the Maneuvering Characteristic Augmentation System, the MCAS. 2 fatal crashes, close to 350 people died. Here you show Boeing as a company crashed. In some sense, in reputation, they have never recovered since then. And of course, we are all suffering from PTSD over COVID-19. So we think of COVID-19, first of all, as a public health crisis. We remember we used to look at this and see how many people are in the hospital and how many people have died. But it was not. It was also an economic crisis. This is from just before Thanksgiving in 2020, where you have what you see here is not a parking lot at Disneyland. It's people waiting in their automobiles to get access to food in food bank to take food home. Okay? 26 million people did not have enough food to eat as the pandemic worsens and holidays near. It was also a social crisis. We had George Floyd. We have Black Lives Movement. We had protests. We had riots. We had looting. It was a social crisis. And of course, we cannot forget January 6th of 2021, also a political crisis that nominally was not about COVID, but it's hard for me to imagine would have happened without the whole heightened emotions of what's happening around COVID. And when you look at what we went through, there is one big question: why were we not ready? Now here's a book, The Viral Storm, The Dawn of the New Pandemic Age, Nathan Wolf. And you think, oh, this is probably a book about COVID, except this book was published in 2011. People have predicted a pandemic. This was not unforeseen. It was not a black swan. 2009, you see a picture, President Obama meeting with science advisor, talk about preparation for the possible swine flu pandemic. 2006, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Michael O. Levitt, this in the George W. Bush administration, testify in front of the Senate, preparing for the pandemic flu. Yet we were not ready. In spite of all the warnings, we were not ready. The question is why? That's kind of, I'm trying to answer this question, why? And for this, I'll take you back to the early days. The pandemic is just starting, March 2020. We're suddenly starting to realize the enormity of what is happening. It just is starting to dawn on us. And people start talking about flattening the curve. So what was flattening the curve? All pandemic proceeds in a bell-shaped curve. Why? Because at some point, the pathogen runs out of hosts, and then the pandemic slows down. And people say, we can't stop it right now. We had no vaccination. We can't stop it, but we can at least flatten the curve. Why do we need to flatten the curve? And the idea was many hundreds of thousands of infections will happen. People were naive then. They talk about hundreds of thousands of infections. We had no clue what was really coming ahead for us. But they don't have to happen at once, because you may remember what it was like in New York City during the early days of the pandemic, where essentially the hospitals were crumbling under the pressures, or northern Italy, places that were somehow hot spots, and the health system just could not cope with it. Here is a title, a headline from April 2020, Market Watch. Nurses are wearing garbage bags as they battle coronavirus. It's like something out of Twilight Zone. Why? Because the hospital did not enough PPEs. Remember PPEs? Personal protective equipment. So they had to wear garbage bags just to protect themselves. So on March 2020, William Galston from the Brookings Institute wrote a column that opened my eyes. It was in the Wall Street Journal, and it says, efficiency is not the only economic virtue. And I'm quoting, what if the relentless pursuit of efficiency, which has dominated American business thinking for decades, has made the global economic system more vulnerable to shocks? And he goes on to explain the difference between efficiency and resilience. Efficiency comes through the optimal adaptation to the existing environment. You're optimally adapted to the current environment, so you are very, very efficient. While resilience, which is the ability to recover from illness, depression, adversity, or the like, resilience requires the capacity to adapt to disruptive changes in the environment. And there is tension between being adapted optimally to the current environment and being adaptable to changes in the environment, which would take for resilience. So let's take a classical example. Remember Dell computers. What was Dell famous for? It was never for technical innovation. It's for efficient logistics. And one of the things they invented was just-in-time manufacturing. So what is the observation? That having a warehouse is actually very expensive. You have to build a warehouse, you have to move the parts in, you have to move them out, and while the parts are sitting in a warehouse, they're not making money. So Dell said, what if the parts arrive at the manufacturing line just in time when they are needed? This is much more efficient. And it is, it's very efficient, and you reduce price. But it assumes best case logistics. The parts have to arrive just in time. That's why it's called just in time. And the better bidder, just in time. But you may remember again, this is the picture I took at Costco in the spring of 2020. This is the paper product section. And you see how well stocked it is. And the headline in Wall Street Journal was, why are there not still enough paper towels? Of course, the real question was not paper towels, but toilet paper, much more critical. Blame lean manufacturing, they said. Lean manufacturing is the same thing as just-in-time manufacturing. Blame lean manufacturing, a decades-long effort to eke out more profits by keeping inventory low, left many manufacturers unprepared when COVID-19 struck, and production is unlikely to ramp up significantly anytime soon. And in fact, when we talk about why did the pandemic cause inflation, was partly shortage of products and availability of money. That's how we get inflation. And just remember, one pilot of a boat on the Suez Canal make a mistake, and world shipping grinds to a halt. One person, I mean, if we think that what happened in Baltimore was bad, what happened in the Suez Canal was much worse. One person mistake, world shipping grinds to a halt. The supply chain crisis. And this goes back again to what happened here during COVID. Again, Wall Street Journal. Why did COVID overwhelm hospitals? A years-long drive for efficiency. Health systems have kept tight rein on employee numbers and expanded outpatient care, helping their finances, but making them less prepared for a medical crisis. Nursing homes, remember, there was huge. In fact, when the pandemic just exploded, I was in Seattle, Washington, and the news came from a nursing home in Redmond that people were dropping dead. What happened in nursing home? Industry could have done more to stop the virus. Wall Street Journal tell us. Again, you cut down, you are more efficient, you cut down on staff, you have less ability to handle when crisis hits. And at the beginning, at least, in the fall of 2020, COVID-19, already 100,000 people just died in nursing home. Nursing home became death trap for many, many people. And coming back to Texas, ERCOT, why did the winter storm, all the system crashed essentially during the winter storm? Well, in February, just a few days after that, there was a lawsuit, a class action lawsuit against ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. And what was the claim? ERCOT did not prepare for such a storm. Why they did not prepare? Because it cost money to prepare. And who knows, maybe there will not be a storm. It's inefficient to plan for a storm. Now, eventually, unfortunately, it turned out that ERCOT is part of the government, so they have sovereign immunity, and the lawsuit was dismissed on technical grounds. But the claim was right. ERCOT utterly failed to plan for cold weather despite multiple warnings. And once you open your eyes to this tension between efficiency and resilience, you will see it everywhere. Even going back, I start thinking about it. I remember something from the financial crisis, an article that I've read maybe in 2008 or 9, the formula that killed Wall Street. So you ask, how did Wall Street crash? I mean, if anybody should be able to do risk hedging, risk management, it's Wall Street. That's what they're about. So what happened to Wall Street? So it turned out they have models. And the model is called VAR, value at risk. And the value at risk is a formula. You don't have to go and parse the formula. I just put it to impress you. The formula is supposed to tell you, you say, okay, with probability 99.99%, I would not lose more than $1 billion, and I know I can cope with $1 billion. But what happens in the black swan event? How much money would you lose then? That was ignored. Oh, it's a black swan. Who has to worry about it? Well, we better worry about it. So the formula worked well under normal condition, but it utterly failed under the special condition of the financial crisis. And even if you look what's happened to American society, remember the 26 million people without food? This was predictable. Look at this, data from 2016, May 2016, the Atlantic Monthly. The secret shame of middle-class American. Nearly half of Americans would have trouble finding $400 to pay for an emergency. $400, that means, you know, if your brake fails, you need to fix your brake, $400. And almost half of Americans cannot cope with it. If you go to $1,000, now it's 2/3 of Americans cannot cope with an unexpected loss of $1,000. In June 2020, Adam Serwer wrote in The Atlantic, it didn't have to be like this. The desperation of US workers in the aftermath of the coronavirus was the product of a series of policy decisions and missed opportunities, designing a society where precarity is accepted. And nobody thinks about resilience. So I want to see how nature handled this tension between efficiency and resilience. And in 2016, I was editor-in-chief of this magazine, computing magazine, Communication of the ACM, and I solicited an article, The Theory of Evolution Under the Lens of Computation, and I told them, your title is not sexy enough. So they said, what do you suggest? I said, how about sex as an algorithm? And we had a bit of a dilemma what to put on the cover, so we decided to put pink. It's just a color, right? But many people got offended to seeing sex and pink together. But the article was a serious article. And it looked at the following issue. So you can think of what nature is doing with evolution as a search for optimal adaptation. Now, in computer science, we have a standard search algorithm. It's called simulated annealing. It doesn't matter what exactly does it do. It's a standard search algorithm. There's also another search algorithm called genetic algorithm. Now, we have a lot of experience, and we know that simulated annealing is much better search algorithms than genetic algorithms. Never, the genetic algorithm does, you can think like this. Simulated annealing only does mutations, one change at a time. Genetic algorithms do cross-breeding of chromosomes. Of course, we know nature does for almost all animals. We do cross-breeding of chromosomes. And the question is why? It's not the best algorithm. Why does nature choose sexual reproduction as the almost exclusive mechanism in animals? You see, bacteria sometimes they go just purely by mutation, but for all animals, it's usually sexual reproduction. This is the question they ask in the paper. And they have an answer. And the answer is, it's not just about doing an optimal search. They say what sexual reproduction offers is genetic diversity. And why genetic diversity is important? Because the environment changes. If the species is more genetically diverse, some individuals will perish, but others will survive. So for the survival of the species, you need to have more genetic diversity, and it makes the species more resilient. So the purpose of sex, if you didn't know until now, is resilience. Keep it in mind. So you can think that efficiency is short-term optimization. I want to make money now. While resilient asks, well, how do I stay in business for the next 25 years, for the next 50 years? Well, nature worries about long-term survival, survival of the species. The dinosaurs were amazing hunting machines, right? But they did not survive. They couldn't adapt. And Darwin told us, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent, message to humans, not the most intelligent, it is the one that is most adaptable to change. That's the name of the game. You want resilience, you have to be adaptable. And that means sacrificing efficiency. And the best example to efficiency versus resilience is this picture showing you natural pine versus genetically modified pine. Which one do you think is natural? Which one is genetically modified? Natural is the bottom, okay? What do you see there? Many rings. It doesn't grow fast. It grows slowly, but you have many, many rings. The GM pine grows much faster. You see every ring is fat. Which one do you think is a stronger beam? You have the more layers you have, the stronger you are. This is a perfect picture. If I need one picture of efficiency versus resilience, it's this picture. Now, I'm going to be, there are some people in computer science, I'm going to be a little more technical, but don't worry, just a few slides will be a bit more technical, and the rest will be a bit more, again, more kind of general and philosophical. But because I want to talk to computer scientists, because this is built in the DNA of our field. This is the cover of the Art of Computing Programming, the closest we have in computer science to the Bible of computer science, written by Don Knuth, the closest we have to patron saint of computing, okay? And so the focus is on the analysis of algorithm. And here is from Wikipedia. In computer science, the analysis of algorithm is the process of finding the computational complexity of algorithms, the amount of time, storage, or other resources needed to execute them. So in the standard, you can open that book and you see the full analysis, the full focus is on efficiency. It's on efficiency. So let me take one concrete example. Again, this is for the computer scientists. You're familiar with sorting. And you know that there are good sorting algorithms. They would be in n log n. And there are sorting algorithms that are not so good, they will be quadratic. And we tell all the students, quadratic is very wasteful. You want to be n log n. This is much faster, much more efficient. But then in 2010, David Ackley asked what happened when the sorting algorithm work on comparing between two elements. And if they're not in the right order, you swap them. Suppose that each comparison has a probability of 10% of giving you an error. So he did simulation to see what happens if you do sorting with errors using these three algorithms. How, at the end result, how far from being sorted it's going to be. And suddenly, bubble sort, which is considered, this is the algorithm we make fun of, was the best algorithm. And why did it give the best sorting? Because it had redundant comparisons. So the chance of making an error, each error had a much smaller impact. So redundant comparison help to get better results, and we'll come back to this point of redundancy. Because redundancy, if one thing you should remember at the very end, redundancy is a way to build resilience. Let's look at an algorithm that you are all using every day. Google, how did Google become famous? Google became famous in the 90s because you did a Google search and you got the result in a particular order. And before Google, the order was just kind of random, and you have to go page by page after page to find, screen after screen, to find a good finding. And then Google gave you just the perfect order. And Google had Larry Page, who was one of the co-founder of Google, said, look, if many websites point to you, you must be important. And if many important websites point to you, you must be very important. And if many very important websites point to you, you must be very, very, very important, and so on. And use this idea to find what are the most important web pages. And that was the key for the Google search engine. And it worked like a charm until people realized, so if I want to open an Israeli restaurant in Houston, and I want search engine to find it, what do? I create many fake websites, and I create many fake links, and it will go to the top. And this became a business. Search engine optimization was all about creating these fake links to float your result to the top. So PageRank was efficient, but it was not resilient. And in fact, Google retired it. The patent has expired. And if you ask today Google, how do you rank your search result, they will say, trade secret, we cannot tell you. Because if they tell us, people will try to game the system. Again, this is a bit technical. There is a concept called, in computer science, of probably approximately correct. So I'm trying to estimate to compute some function, and I'm willing to approximate it within and the concept is you want to approximate within a factor of 1 plus epsilon and confidence delta. This is a classic notion. But it didn't ask what happened in the tail event, what happened in the 1 minus delta event. How large can the error be? It doesn't talk about it. So in a work some years ago, together with collaborator, we introduced what we call strong pack, which the result should be correct in expectation. That means that the tail error cannot be too large, and that gives you resilience. Now I want to talk about another aspect of efficiency. So, and this had to do with friction. So a decade ago I wrote, our discipline is dedicated to reducing friction. Latency must be eliminated. Bandwidth must increase. Ubiquity should be universal. Our goal is to reduce the friction of computing and communication as much as possible. This is how we operate. Friction is bad. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg talked about what is the goal of Facebook, frictionless sharing. But now we know that frictionless sharing is not a utopia. It causes all kinds of things. For example, what do people click more? On boring news or sensational news? Sensational news. So all kind of, by now they become societal ills. We know that they start with this frictionless sharing. It's too easy to share. I know I share too much. And the lack of friction has other problems. For example, people in Wall Street discovered some years in 2010 in Wall Street, we have something called the flash crash. The Dow Jones fell 600 points in 5 minutes. $1 trillion of equity evaporated in 5 minutes. $1 trillion evaporated in 5 minutes. And people say, what happened? And the analysis says there is something called now high-frequency trading. The Wall Street firm discovered that if I get to execute my order a fraction of a second before you, I win. So how do I do that? I'll buy a faster machine, a faster network, okay? All these kind of things. And now it's become a race to the bottom, right? You do it in 1 microsecond. I'll do it half a microsecond. I'll do it in a nanosecond. And the proponents said, well, the market is more liquid. But economists said, no, this is, at some point there's diminishing value. Nobody gains anymore by creating faster execution. But what you get is a very unstable market, because one order, another order, they can come after each other in very, very short sequence, and the market crashes. So what you get, you lost, it's efficient, but you lost resilience. And this trade-off even come up in other aspects of life. So this caught my eye a few years ago, an article in the Washington Post by Jenna Birch. Why is it so hard to turn a Tinder date into a relationship? She said, despite the swarms of matches over the years, I never have an update turned into actual relationship. An academic study confirmed that meeting online is less likely to lead into an actual relationship. Now, why is that? The answer is because what you have to do in Tinder is just sweep to the left, sweep to the right. The effort is very small. And so if something doesn't work, you say, oh, well, I'll sweep again. And in fact, we all know there is an old country song. Easy come, easy goes. No hard feelings, darling, no regrets. If you're less invested, if you invested less, you're less motivated to invest. So if I go across the quad, I go to my, do we have mechanical engineers here? If I tell you, friction is bad. In computing, we don't believe in friction. You guys should do the same. Eliminate all friction. You're going to tell me you're out of your mind with an adjective inserted there. Okay, why? It depends where. Between the tire and the road, I want friction. The drive shaft, I want to eliminate friction. It depends where. This nuanced understanding of when friction, where do we want friction, where do we want friction, we don't have it in computing. We don't have the same nuanced understanding that you have to have the right amount of friction in the right place in the right time. Why? Because we want to be efficient. And David Ackley, his article was a call to go beyond what he called CEO software. What is CEO? Correct and efficient. So of course the software should be correct. It should do what it's supposed to do. And it should be efficient. He said that's not enough. He said esteem for efficiency should be tempered with respect for robustness. Okay? It will have to have better visibility into the efficiency robustness trade-off. Use robustness rather than resilience, but it's part of the same family. He said existing software quality metrics could be expanded to include correctness degradation and the various fault model. What happens if things don't behave in the best possible way? How will your just-in-time system cope with failure in the logistical systems? And now we can go back to the 737 MAX and see, we know how it happened. First of all, Boeing had new engines which are more fuel efficient. Now, they could have designed a new airframe, but it is expensive to design a new airframe. So they says, okay, how about we put the new engines on the old frame of the 737? Well, the answer was, well, this is an old frame, new engines, it will be unstable. No problem. The automatic pilot will handle the instability and will balance the plane. The automatic pilot needs to sense what's going on. Let's make it one sensor. It is cheaper to put one sensor. What happens if that one sensor failed? The plane is unstable, 2 planes crashed, 350 people died, unestimable loss in reputation. In retrospect, the engineer already optimized the fuel economy and time to market at the expense of safety. The New York Times wrote, the Boeing 737 MAX is a saga of capitalism gone awry because they put efficiency as the only goal. And here is a quote from a colleague of mine who works in computer security. This is a verbatim quote. I'm just copied his email to me. I wrote that we need to put more emphasis on security, and he wrote to me, you have no idea what you're talking about. And he explained, first somebody built a thing, and it's super useful. Then eventually somebody else come along and find a vulnerability. Then security become part of the engineering process. Just like we need to make sure that our code does not have bug to make it crash, we also need to make sure our code does not have bug that can be exploited for bad purposes. Turn the crack for a few enough years, eventually security gets better. Eventually. But what happens in the meantime? In fact, when Tech Republic did a survey of developer of what's called free and open source software, security was last on their priority. Because what sells? Features sell, security doesn't sell. How many people buy a car for security? I know one car that security is a sales feature, Volvo. Everybody else just has to meet the standard. They do nothing more. They will not spend a cent more than what it takes to meet the standard from the Department of Transportation. So today, we have in terms of, we are all dependent on computing technology. The computer age is about 75 plus years. We have the Turing Award, which is a Nobel Prize in computing. Before computer scientists could get real Nobel Prize. We call it Nobel Prize in computing. And you can look at all the Turing Awards going back now 50 plus years, and you see how many were given in computer security. So you find 4 in cryptography, but none in computer security. And I was very intrigued by that, so I asked people who are involved, well, how come there are no Turing Awards in security? And they tell me, name and accomplishment will be deserving of an award. And the answer was, we can have one. And at this point, it's not just that you're worried somebody will steal your credit card. Critical infrastructure can become down. In 2020, major pipeline was forced to close because of cyber attack. Hospitals are coming under attack. Pharmacy chains are coming under attack. And you would think that computer science would say, this is our biggest problem. No, it just, oh, well, okay, we'll think about it eventually. And part of the attitude comes from what I call cyber libertarianism. So if you look at the other, take the automobile industry, 1908, Ford Model T roll off the manufacturing lines. Hugely successful automobile. And then what people discover? People get killed on the road. And so we have spent over 100 years trying to make automobiles safer. For example, we have National Transportation Safety Board. We don't have the National Cybersecurity Board. And when you go to Silicon Valley and you said we need some regulation, no regulation. In fact, if you have followed the news, some of the big venture capitalists now, they have become more political. And are supporting the candidate whom I won't mention his name, but I said his and not her. And why do they support this candidate? Low regulation, low taxes. That's what they want. Everything else, who cares? But we see that there is not enough market incentive to push companies to authorize cybersecurity. And one reason is, every time you use computer product, you sign a contract with them, right? You click on the license. You never read the license. The license says, we are not liable. So why should they invest in cybersecurity? They are not liable. In contrast, here is what happened with automobile. So the picture on the left from 1917, Michigan, they discover an amazing thing. You know, if you put a white line in the middle of the road, and you tell cars to always drive to the right of the white line, that avoids accident. What an amazing discovery, okay? This is a picture was given to me by Icelandic colleague. This is him and his car, and he survived the crash. He came out okay. The car, you can see, the car is not doing well. He was doing fine. And he said, why is that? Seat belt, airbag, and in front, the front of the car was designed to absorb the shock. So the car was smashed. He came out all okay, because we have designed the car for passenger safety. Now, I want to go back. Remember, we started with the beginning with economics. So why were we not ready for the pandemic? The answer is obvious. Because it costs money to get ready for a pandemic. Now, of course, it costs much more money not to be ready for a pandemic once a pandemic hits. But who knows, maybe it won't hit. So February of 2020, this is just a few days before the pandemic is exploding on us. President Trump defends huge cut to CDC budget by saying, we can hire more doctors when we need them. Of course, when you need them, it's too late to go run around and try to hire them. In 2019, the Trump administration shut down the CDC's Vaccine Safety Office. It's hard to believe it when you look at it today in historical context. Well, who needs to worry about vaccine safety? So let's talk about economic efficiency. So here is, I went to Investopedia to get some definitions. So what is economic efficiency? Goods and factor of production are distributed or allocated to the most vulnerable uses and waste is minimized. This definition of economic efficiency. Furthermore, free market advocates argue that through individual self-interest and freedom of production as well as consumption, economic efficiency is achieved and the best interests of society overall are fulfilled. People believe in the free market. Free market is magical. It gives us efficiency and optimality. But some economists are skeptical. Danny Roderick says, MIT, economists tend to enamored with the power of market to promote overall economic prosperity. So this is now a specific question. Does efficiency guarantee optimality? So this question, in fact, was addressed by computer scientists. And what they did, they first of all visited classical economic theorem. Any economist here? Any economic student? First welfare theorem. Standard in microeconomics, okay? And it basically says that under technical assumption, the free market will tend towards a competitive Pareto optimal equilibrium. Pareto optimal means that nobody can gain unless somebody else loses. And this is what they call efficiency. Pareto optimality is efficiency. Now the question is, okay, it gives you an equilibrium. Does it serve the best interests of society? So this question, again, was answered by Papa Dimitriou, who likes to use what he called computational lens to look at economics. And in 1999, together with the student Koutsopias, they looked at Nash equilibria, which is one form of equilibrium. And he said there are many possible Nash equilibria in games. Some are better than others. Let's take the best Nash equilibria in terms of societal utility and compare it to the worst Nash equilibrium. And they show that they call this the price of anarchy. If no one sits there and manages the market can end up in a bad equilibrium rather than a good equilibrium. And they said the gap can be arbitrarily high. So this idea that the free market guarantees optimality is just plain wrong. It's just not true. Economic efficiency does not guarantee the best interest of society as a whole are fulfilled. It's a myth. It gives us efficiency, does not give us optimality. In fact, they even show that how does the market reach equilibrium? I raise the price, you buy less, some supplier bring more parts. I mean, it's everyone make a small step until the market converges to an equilibrium. How long does it take? They say it can take a very, very long time. But if it can take a very long time, the market will never reach equilibrium because circumstances change. There is a drought, there is rain, supply doesn't work. So this idea that market equilibrium never happens. It's a myth. Market is never at equilibrium because it takes too long to reach an equilibrium. The economists, there's been too much focus on equilibrium. And here is an example. This is very recent. I just listened to a segment on I think Money Planet on NPR. They talk about generic drugs. So generic drugs were, and we basically allowed once drugs go off patent, we allow other producers to come and they cannot use the same name, but they can sell you generic drugs and they are cheaper. But what happened? If they're cheaper, somebody else will come and produce it even cheaper and even cheaper. This becomes a race to the bottom. At some point, it's just not profitable enough. So while on one hand, we have said a lot of money, calculation is that U.S. healthcare system, including patient, employer, and taxpayer, saved over $400 billion in 2022 using FDA-approved generic and biosimilar drugs. On the other hand, shortage of generic drugs are now the norm, leaving the doctor and patients scrambling to find the medicine they need because they become so cheap, it's not profitable to sell them anymore. So companies get out of the market. And you may remember the classical movie from 1987, Wall Street, with Michael Douglas playing a wolf of Wall Street called Gordon Gekko, who gave a fiery speech and tell us that greed is good. Greed, for lack of other words, is good. Greed is good. Why is greed good? So, well, the invisible hand, right? Everybody is greedy, and magically we're all better off. But if you're in computer science, we talk about greedy algorithms, and we use them as an example of algorithms that are not always the best. So greedy algorithms are not the best. And so right now, for example, we have a local optimum in the computing market. We have cyber insecurity. It's a market failure because there's no incentive for security. And how do we get out of it? Not without regulation. And I'll take another kind of axiom of economics, that free trade is good. So why is free trade good? This is a classical theorem or observation by David Ricardo, early 19th century, that if you have two countries, one is good in making wool and another one is good, let's say, making cotton, they should each focus on their core competency and trade with each other, and they will be more efficient for both of them. This is true. But what about resilience? For example, Europe decided that the most efficient way for them to get energy is to get natural gas from Russia. And now, how does Russia keep fighting the Ukraine? Because Europe keep buying their gas, because they have no other source of energy. So it was efficient, but not resilient. And not only that, where did we put today the new oil is chips, computer chips. Where do we make them? The majority of semiconductors are produced in the tensest geopolitical location in the world. The tensest geopolitical location in the world today is China. We're partly supporting Ukraine because if Ukraine falls to Russia, China says, okay, Taiwan is next. And there we find the majority of the world's supply of semiconductor. So free trade is efficient, no question, but it is not resilient. Now we can go back and look at COVID-19 and say, okay, something did work. I would say two things worked, magic. One is we had mRNA vaccine. We had vaccine in 1 year. I mean, when the pandemic started, I was thinking this is going to be 5 years, because normally it takes 5 years to design a wicked strain vaccine. But mRNA we had in 1 year. It was amazing. The other thing was amazing was the internet. You could send all the students home and says, okay, guys, next week, after the spring break, we're going to teach on Zoom. And poof, suddenly we're able to shop from home, teach from home, learn from home, seeing doctors from home. What enabled us suddenly to switch and be able to do it? Everybody, think about it. Suddenly everybody needs Zoom, and Zoom was there. And the answer was redundancy. We had redundant capacity. And redundancy is really an old idea in computing. If you're an electrical engineer, you know about error correcting code. How do you, if you're transmitting information and there are errors, how do you guarantee that you are able to communicate? Redundant bits. In fact, the observation was by John von Neumann in 1956 asked, each cell is unreliable, each cell can fail. How do we still survive? His answer was redundancy. We have redundant cells. What do we do after we had the bank crisis in 2008? We said, banks, you must have redundant capital, because redundancy buys you resilience. And to me, this is just amazing kind of historical perspective. We survived COVID because of the Cold War. Because during the Cold War, there was a risk of nuclear conflict. And you need deterrence. But to have deterrence, you must have the capability of second strike. Because if you don't have the capability of second strike, it encourages each one to attack first. Now, to be able to have second strike capability, it's not about just having the triad, the nuclear submarines, the bombers, and the ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles. You need a communication system that can survive a nuclear attack. And how do we get such a robust communication system? Redundancy. So packet switching, the system we use today for the internet, was invented in the 60s in order to be able to survive, for the communication system to survive a nuclear attack and be able to respond. So the technology from the 60s saved us in the 2020s. So let me try to kind of summarize it. I think resilience is incredibly important, but underappreciated societal need. We do not talk about it enough. We just take it for granted. And we focus on efficiency, but not on resilience. And I think computing, engineering, and economics, we must start thinking about resilience. But the observation about resilience is that most of us, it's hard for us to think about resilience, okay? So for example, Texas requires me, when I re-register my car every year, I have to show proof of insurance. Now, why do we buy insurance? Resilience, okay? So if something bad happens, we can survive, financially we can survive it. So, but I do it for myself. I buy insurance for myself. Why does the state forces me to buy insurance? Because the state knows that buying insurance is inefficient. If I look at how much money I spend on insurance versus how much money I got back from insurance company, of course, we know the insurance companies make money. We don't make money on insurance. So if it would left up to us, we would not buy insurance. We have to be forced to buy insurance. So if we want resilience, it requires societal action. And this leads me to the final observation, Adam Tooze's New York Times. What if the coronavirus crisis is just a trial run? We have other crises that we need to think about, the climate crisis. And it's already happening. Even in 2021, there was a heat wave in the northwest, which is usually the mildest climate in the country is in the northwest. And there was a heat wave. And in British Columbia, almost 500 people died from heat. And is it 2021? The emergency department at Oregon Health Science University rarely has been so busy, even during the worst case of COVID-19. The system was overwhelmed, said Mary Tansky, chair of the Department of Emergency Medicine. Because of the heat wave, many people with heat stroke, and the hospital was busier than it was during COVID-19. And the question that I've been asking is, will COVID change things? COVID give us an example, what happened when we don't have resilience? I'm not the only one asking. Farid Zakaria, the pandemic upended the present. It's given us a chance to remake the future. Will we take the chance? Matt Simons in Wired, The COVID pandemic had brought incalculable suffering and trauma, offers way for people, even society, to change for the better. Will we change for the better? Will AC after COVID be different than before COVID? I don't know. From Wired magazine, from the fallen Champlain Tower to climate change, humans have yet learned to avoid catastrophes they know are coming. And to me, this cartoon says it all. I love this cartoon. A rally. Who wants change? Everybody raise their hand. Who wants to change? Everybody folding their hands. Everybody wants change. Nobody is willing to change. And I can't find a better quote than the one by Kurt Vonnegut. We will go down in history as the first society that wouldn't save itself because it was not cost effective. And in closing, just an amazing coincidence. I gave exactly this talk on July 18, 2020, this year, in the Simon Institute in Berkeley. July 18. Anybody remember what happened on July 19? Crowd strike, pushed an update, push a button, push an update has not been checked, and then outage all around the world. Airline, my flight back home from California was canceled. And what did the Washington Post say? What's to blame for crowd strike mess? Our drive for efficiency. New York Times, what happened to digital resilience? And I got dozens and dozens of email. Okay, you want to have a demo, but did it have to be so bad? Thank you very much.
We have time for questions. Please raise your hand and we'll bring you a microphone.
Yeah, it's coming. Wait, Richard, give it a second.
So, Moshe, I hear you all the time talk about our goal should be to make the world a better place. Okay?
Absolutely.
I've heard you say that many, many times.
Yeah, I very much believe it.
Okay, so now with respect to computing, okay, I want to know, are we making the world a better place? Because I'll go back to my old life before the computing, and I was happier then, okay, than this. So I'm just telling you, and if not, what should we be doing? I mean, should we be changing education? Should we be changing government? What should we do to make the world a better place if we're not doing enough?
So I have hopes in the younger generation. I think, and I'm giving this talk, and I talk about bettering of the world because, frankly, my generation, our generation, screwed up. You know, we just keep thinking, okay, trust the market will do it all, especially since Reagan became president, you know, just believe in the market, free markets, deregulation, and that will give us the magical world we want. And this value of actually, amazingly, I discovered recently this Catholic value. And I'm getting new education in Catholicism. My previous education ended up with the Spanish Inquisition, but now I'm learning the common good is a Catholic value. And I'm reading papers, the common good, written by Catholic bishops. So we need to start thinking about society. I think one of the two, both Reagan and Thatcher, to me, said absolutely horrible things. Thatcher said, there's no such thing as society. That's what she said, direct quote. So we're all for ourselves, right? It's the law of the jungle. Everyone for themselves. Reagan said, the scariest sentence in the English language is, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. But what is we the people? What is the government? We're not talking about some foreign government. The government is we the people, right? That's how we started the Declaration of Independence, we the people. So the point is, do we want to have a society that we want to bequeath to our children, to our grandchildren? And that will not happen by everybody being greedy. And that's the culture we need to change. And I'm hoping that the younger generation will look at what we have left them and it says, this cannot continue. This cannot continue.
So do you think universities should play a major role in education?
So in computer science, you know, we started teaching computing ethics and society, I think in 2018. And we started teaching the course. I was involved at the beginning. And then is Rodrigo here? Oh, here's Rodrigo is there. Rodrigo, I managed to bring Rodrigo twice. and he's doing a fantastic job in teaching the course. And first, I convinced the department to hire him. So he's now faculty member in computer science. And the students came to us and said, this course is an elective. It should be a required course. The students said that. And the faculty said, we hear you. And now it's a required course. And now we're trying to take this culture and spread it across the university. Because if you look at the mission of the Rice University, it does talk about unsurpassed teaching, outstanding research, and betterment of the world. But we talk about teaching, we talk about research, we barely talk about betterment of the world. And I look at many ills of the university, and I go back to that. We forgot the betterment of the world is our core mission. I'm not saying that we should not do research in cosmology, but the raison d'etre for the university is to contribute to the betterment of the world. And we have lost that value, and we must reclaim it, in my opinion.
Other questions?
Thank you for the great talk. I just had a question about, so it seems like a common theme that kept popping up was there are incentive structures for individuals and companies to make, and engineering teams to make decisions that optimize efficiency, but do not like look at resilience, and that's how you have disasters like 737 MAX. How do we think about like stepping past those like incentive structures that are designed to maximize efficiency?
So if you talk to economists, they will say, oh, these are market failures. They realize that. In fact, there is something they would use, market externality. So the fact is that the carbon pollution is not priced. Again, the government forces me to go once a year, take my car, and have emission inspection. Why? Because for me, I mean, okay, I pollute a little bit, but it's not my problem. So the only way we are going to address this problem is by collective action, okay? So that's, but if you look, I mean, this, people say collective action, and people think this is Marxism-Leninism. What is the first preamble of the first part of the Constitution? Is all about we the people, in order to form a more perfect union for national defense, you know, pursuit of prosperity. We have to do things collectively. The framers recognize it, okay? Somehow that people remember from the American culture is the Wild West, where everybody was every person to himself, carrying guns, that's all left. But the real innovation of the United States was a group of people coming together to form a government, people who government for the people, by the people, okay? That was a huge innovation, you know, compared to, this was at the time where, you know, absolute monarchies in Europe. And here we wrote a document which was a social compact. Right? It's a collective agreement to do things as a society for a better society. And so one of the issues is, for example, about carbon emission, how to price it into the market. And now people are debating what is the best way to do that. Okay, there are different ways: carbon limits, carbon emission, carbon, you know, offset trading. Now we can have a debate on the particular mechanism. But unless we price carbon emission, we put back into the marketplace, there's no incentive to be fuel efficient.
Other questions?
Hey, Moshe, very nice talk. You didn't talk much about competition, right? Like, I feel like when you don't have a competitor, you can afford to be resilient. But if you have a competitor, then resilience might take you out of the market. And so how do you account for that?
So years ago, I did a study on automation and its impact on labor. And one of the things, we met with some companies. And some of the more enlightened companies says, you know, some company will tell you that they hate regulation. And it says, well, it depends. But some regulation is actually good for us. Why? Because establish a line, when you come, for example, take car safety, automobile safety. There are standards that they have to meet, and they know if they meet these standards, that's all they have to do, okay? So why? Because it turns out that making your car safer Doesn't pay off. People doesn't buy the car more. You cannot see safety. You can see all kind of feature. You cannot see safety. And so for many things like that, what you want to do is to create, basically making sure that all the companies meet certain standards. They will compete for certain things. You know, we need to be creative about, remember, the market is not, people talk about the free market as if it just came down from heaven. The free market is a human institution. We come up with a set of rules that says, okay, this is how it works. This is what you can do. This is what you cannot do. For example, we invented the stock market. People realize, there is a way I can trade. I'll start selling something short, then we'll push the price down, and once I push the price down, I'll go and buy it back. So we issue limits on short trading, that the stock basically has to go up for you to short sell it. We make rules. It's our job is to make the proper rules for the market, defining how the computation should proceed. But it's not naked competition. We have all kinds of rules about what company, for example, companies are not allowed to collude. We said that's not legal, right? They said, why not? We just want to sit together and talk about prices. No, you cannot talk about prices. Even universities are getting in trouble for colluding about financial aid. So we make the rules of competition. Competition is not arbitrary. Think of one of the most competitive games, chess. It's a competition, right? But it's competition according to specific rules. And what we need to think about, I'm not talking about eliminating competition, but about revisiting the rules. All the questions are on this side. You don't get to exercise today.
Great talk, Moshe. I'm thinking back to what you were saying about Costco and how they got burned by chasing efficiency by keeping inventories low. But if you follow the opposite strategy, you're accused of hoarding. Would you recommend that each of us stockpile every commodity that possibly could fall into shortage as a way of increasing our national resilience?
I have to make a confession. After Winter Storm Uri, I started making sure that I have supply at home of food where I can last about a week without shopping. Because what happens if things happen. And so, I wouldn't call it hoarding. Hoarding is when you're Imelda Marcos and you keep buying shoes, and you have I don't know how many shoes, 6,000 shoes. Hoarding is what billionaires do with money, right? They're hoarding money. What are they doing? They're hoarding money. But some level of hoarding, okay, hoarding is a negative word. But remember, redundancy gives you, for example, that recommend people to have 6 months cash in the bank, 6 months of expenses. You know what your annual expenses is, keep 6 months reserved in the bank. Why? Because something happened. You can lose your job, okay? A conversation I had some months ago with a staff member at Rice. Car broke down. She doesn't have the money to repair the car. If she doesn't have a car, she can't come to work. What happened? She may lose her job. These things happen, okay? So the answer is, the problem is with unbounded hoarding, which is, again, what billionaires do, right? There's no limit to how much money they hoard. But most of that, some redundancy gives us resilience.
Quick follow-up. What's your plan for week 2?
What's my plan for?
Week 2.
Week 2. There I have a problem. What happened? I mean, look, all of us has to navigate it. All of us has to navigate. Okay, I prepare for 1 week without supply. What happened? You have the survivalist. These are the people who plan for what happened if 6 months without supply. The world commerce system fails. Some of the billionaires, build bunkers in I don't know where, in Hawaii, in private planes, so they can survive the collapse of society. The answer is, we cannot survive the collapse of society. So all of us, it's a trade-off. Remember, in perfect life, there are no solutions. In real life, there are no perfect solutions, only trade-off. Everything is a trade-off, okay? I take risk. Why? What's the risk? When you drive about 100 miles, you know what is your risk of dying when you drive 100 miles? 1 in a million. How many people here who say, no, I'm not driving 100 miles, it's too risky. We take risk in life. If you take no risk, you can go anything. You're going to hide under the bed and cry, right? And even that is risky. So we all, life is risky. In fact, we know what happened at the end, right? All of us. It's risky. We all die at the end. And so it's all about navigation, and that's why it's a trade-off. So you can't say, okay, I'll focus all on resilience. You can't do that either. Because if you're a business and you ignore efficiency, you'll go out of business. It's all about navigating a fine line. One more, Nathan, here, and then we'll close. Well, two more. Okay, Nathan, and one more up there. Okay, then that will be it, yeah.
So if at a fundamental level, as you were talking about sexual reproduction, inefficient but resilient, where we are now, and that was millions of years of evolution, where we are now, we have these things that are incredibly efficient, and we're all kind of forced, like 94% of Americans or whatever, maybe 99 have these. Is there a fundamental conflict between humans and this type of technology? Are we just kind of running headlong at each other with this because it's the relentless pursuit of fractional efficiency, and yet it's in the hands of inefficient creatures?
So in some sense, I would say we made, in fact, I'm writing now a piece just on this topic, that we're destined to have these devices. Why? Because about 1 million years ago, we started building tools. And we developed intelligence. And then at some point we realized that computing is useful, okay? I mean, we found a bone, the lemembo bone from about 40,000 years ago with notches. Obviously someone was counting. We don't know exactly what they were counting, like 29 notches, maybe the days of the month. And once you start computing, people start building abaci and start building tools. So somehow this combination of tool building and intelligence and the usefulness of computing destine us to build these devices. My worry is that we're doing it mindlessly. So now we have Silicon Valley. Oh, we have to build AGI. We have to build artificial general intelligence. We already saw what happened with these phones. These phones, yeah, they're convenient, they're very efficient. Is our life better? Well, we have lots of evidence. For example, the mental health crisis for young people, there is no definitive answer what's causing it, but whenever you do it, phones, smartphone, and social media on the phones emerges as one of the at least major factors. And now we want to have machines that would be, some people call it, to build fake people. This is a good goal. We are not reflecting as a society on what we are doing. We're just saying, let the market decide. The market goes after, the market goes, all the what they're telling you about democratizing technology, this is all, BS. Silicon Valley drives them, only one thing drives them, money.
By the way, there's one of those Silicon Valley guys who wants to be the federal czar of government efficiency.
Yes, that's absolutely scary. This combination, Silicon Valley is sitting in the White House. This is stuff of nightmares. Okay, why don't we wrap up here? I'm happy to take one more question there and we'll close.
It's just a comment on the trade-off between efficiency and resiliency. There's all kinds of things that we need to be resilient against, and the question is, where do we set the threshold or the cutoff, at which point? And there is a statistical and mathematical rule called relative operating characteristics. Where do you set the threshold? Depends on, in the end, on the cost of doing one decision versus the other.
So one of the things that I think that, and I'm happy to be corrected, that I want to see resilience being a more major topic in economics. I don't see much of this being studied in economics, how to get resilience, and I'm happy to be educated otherwise, but that to me has to be a major topic. I think, again, in computer science, we don't talk much about this topic, okay? Efficiency, everybody in computer science knows about efficiency, not about resilience. There's some specialized area of computer science when we talk about fault tolerance, but no more broadly about resilience.
No,
okay?
I'm talking about cost in a general sense, like versus watchful observation versus removing the prostate.
Hold the mic close to your mouth.
Okay.
Much better.
Okay. By cost, I mean general cost. Doing exploratory surgery versus just watchful observation.
So, there is the issue is the reason it's hard to find the proper balance is because there's no absolute way to do that, okay? How much risk are you willing to take? Each one of us has a different level of risk tolerance, okay? There are people who won't fly because they're risky. There are people who won't drive because it's too risky. What do we decide? What is if I tell you 1 in a million when you drive 100 miles. You say, okay, I'll take the risk. Suppose I tell you, well, it's 1 in 100,000. Actually, we're not even very good at realizing how much risk are we taking when it's 1 in a million. I did an experiment. I asked ChatGPT, what is the likelihood that Allen Center will collapse tomorrow? It says 1 in a million. I said, how did you come up with it? He said, oh, it's just typical low probability event. So it made up a number, 1 in a million. 1 in a million is a risk that we're willing to take. But the reason that this trade-off is hard to navigate is because no absolute correct way to do that, okay? You can put too much on resilience, you can put too much on efficiency, and we have not developed the wisdom how to navigate well between these two conflicting demands. Let's close it here. Reception is outside.